Recording's on now. Special episode, and we have a guest, another guest. Last time I tortured YouTube's biggest naval historian with anime boat waifus. This time we've got a serious conversation. I am joined by Habitual Line Crosser with us today. He is a NCO, non-commissioned officer in the United States Army, specializing in air defense artillery. You might have seen him on TikTok if you partake in that particular vice. I certainly do, which is how I found him. But if you want to just introduce yourself, my guy, just plug your merch, plug your channel, just go.
All right, I am HLC, or Habitual Line Crosser. I got my big start on TikTok, and now I've started coming over to YouTube. He is absolutely correct. I have been in the United States Army for about 13 years. I spent the first 2 years of my career as a 19 kilo, so I worked actually on the Abrams main battle tank. I was on a SEP V2, and then I reclassed, and I have come over to Patriot Fire Control. I have since then done every dang position almost in Patriot, as well as spent 4 years testing and designing new systems along some very, very big Fortune 500 companies, and now I currently teach it at the senior leader level. Also, well, I guess he told me to plug it, so merch link in bio. Whenever you come to any of my stuff, Habitual Line Crosser, which I'm sure he will, tag me in somewhere.
I'll be tagging you in the title of the video, and I'll be putting your merch link in my bio for this video as well. Because,
absolutely, thank you so much, my man.
Man, I can't I can't pay you, so just plug your stuff.
It's all good. I enjoy talking about this stuff. So
yeah, well, it's literally what you're paid for. But as they say, thank you for defending our freedom against incoming hostile objects. Always good to have. Always good to have on hand. A very important job, as the war in Ukraine has shown, which is what we will be discussing today, as well as basically we've got a format for this video. It's pretty loose, but it's basically we talk about air defense in general, then the war in Ukraine, and then his subject of expertise, Patriot. And then, of course, we'll go into how that relates to the war in Ukraine, and, of course, the super secret weapons that Russia will deploy to defeat us and introduce Putin's wonderful utopia that definitely will happen.
Yeah.
So, the first question I have is from an expert, because if you've watched my other videos, you've listened to some nerdy weeb military historian explain the war as best as I can tell you. But from an expert, what is an integrated air defense network? What systems are in it, and how does it work?
Okay, so a lot of people, especially at least from my experience, a lot of fanboys who love Russian systems think that a one-stop shop air defense system is the way to go. Now, there are limitations with every air defense system that is out there. So, for example, the U.S., we have like Patriot, which is, well, we'll talk about that a little bit more. We also have THAAD, which is Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. We have Aegis combat system. We have MSHORAD, which is just coming online, which is the Maneuver SHORAD element. They have both kinetic, which is missiles shooting missiles, and then they also have lasers. I mean, we can actually talk about that now. Couldn't talk about it a couple years ago, but they do have high energy lasers to shoot down incoming projectiles. So when you mesh all these things, and you get them under the same network, what you're doing is creating something called layered air defense, or defense in depth is how we refer to it, which means that the enemy runs into increasing fires as they get closer to you. So certain systems can see a lot further, like an Aegis combat system can see way further than like an MSHORAD. But as it gets closer, each of those systems will start picking it up, and that fire control element can decide who has the highest probability of kill, so that we're not wasting all of our munitions on one small little target. We can decide who is the best shot, who is the highest probability of kill, and who will make that engagement. That's a roundabout way how that network works. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so to translate into English for some of the viewers here, SHORAD is short range air defense. So that would be that would be a manpad, so a Stinger missile. It would be, or perhaps like an Avenger system, which is I'll put a picture up in post, which is a Humvee with a bunch of boxes of Stingers on the side of it. So that's short range air defense. Then you have medium range air defense, which in the olden days would probably be, well, I guess that's SHORAD too. PVADs would probably be SHORAD. Yeah, Vulcan systems would be SHORAD. CWIS is close-in weapon system. So CWIS is, or CRAM for the land. variant.
Yeah, we call it LPWS, but CRAM is its job, so most people notice CRAM.
So, yep. So you've got short-range air defense, which is Stinger missiles, which is either on a vehicle or on a soldier with a man-portable air defense system. I've talked enough about them. You should know what they are by now. And gun systems. Then you have medium-range air defense, which really is more of a Russian thing these days, as far as I mean. Patriot, I guess, covers that, but medium-range, like
So
Gecko and
the way we break it down is lower tier and upper tier, and Patriot is still considered part of lower tier.
Okay.
Upper tier is pretty much THAAD, Aegis, GMD, which is ground-based mid-course defense, which is I know almost nothing about. I just know its name. So we differentiate lower tier and upper tier. As for mid-range, other countries may do that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so mid-range would be your SA-11s, so your Books, Cubs, Geckos, mid-range Soviet Warsaw Pact air defense systems. And then, yeah, so upper tier is THAAD, which covers ballistic threats. You have Aegis, which is a primarily Navy system, which is hooked into the famous spy radar on the Arleigh class destroyer. Basically, Aegis is terrifying. Like, Aegis is the scariest shit in the world.
That is a bad machine. That is, I love it. And I know I always say Aegis, and I always screw that up, and I piss off Navy guys, so it's just now vernacular for me. But you're right, it is Aegis. That's how it's pronounced.
Yep, Aegis. In God we trust, all others we track. Right?
Absolutely, that thing can see. I wish I could talk more about the Aegis combat system and what it can do, because it's just so. It is unbelievably scary. But it also has its limitations and things that it's not as good at shooting. So a lot of variations there with that mesh network.
TLDR, for those of you who don't know what Aegis is, basically it's a radar system that's hooked into a destroyer, and they've got massive radar antennas and stuff on the top. And yes, 90% of it's classified. We don't know what it does. This guy does. We don't. But long story short, in English, if you've read a Tom Clancy novel, it can see everything anywhere. Its onboard computer can track all the targets it sees. And a friend of mine who's a Navy technician doesn't know what Aegis does because he's not high enough, but he does work on the systems that connect into it. And their policy is to get spy radar and then Aegis on first, because if they don't do that, if all the other systems are online and then spy comes back on and then Aegis comes on, Aegis will try to kill everything. It will assign missiles to every single target and murder it.
I did not know that part. That's fucking even more terrifying.
Yeah, basically it can track 1 million targets, and then it can assign the entire missile magazine of the destroyer to kill each individual one all at once. It is the scariest thing in the world, and it can see into space. It can see over the horizon. It's nuts.
It's I wish I could say like how far these things can see. Unfortunately, I can't, because I would put it in perspective for people. But
it can see around the curve of the Earth, but with an integrated data link system, which is what we are talking about with the air defense system. So you mentioned this in a video you did on your TikTok, but is with your integrated air defense that is integrated. So every single component of the air defense network talks to one another through various sensors. Right?
Yes. We do have a current operational network. I'm not sure if I can actually speak on what that network is called. It's actually ran by the Air Force, where everything that has an onboard sensor, we're talking about fighter aircraft. We're talking about bomber aircraft. We're talking about sensor aircraft like the AWACS. We're talking about Aegis, Patriot, THAAD, or just even TIPI-2, which is the THAAD radar off on its own in its used as just surveillance. All these things mesh into that same network, so that way everybody can see what everybody sees.
Yeah. So again, data link basically is a interlinking of systems between them. So if one sensor can see it, it will then transmit that information to everybody, so everyone can see it. Similar to how friendly forces, if you've seen it even in video games and simulators like Blue Force Tracker and stuff like that for friendly forces, if a sensor can see an enemy target, it will then put that on a display for everybody to see. And that's how you guys allocate targets, prioritize things, work out.
Absolutely. So if we have no idea what something is flying through the air, and it's that's the bane of the existence of air defense, and that's how the fratricides incidents in 2003 happened when we shot down the British Tornado and the American F-18. Is we just get kinematics. It's moving this high, it's moving this fast. This is its dive angle. And so we have to figure out what that is. And that's not a whole lot of information to go off of, especially when something's screaming at you at very, very fast. So when you have a mesh network like that, if you have friendly aircraft in the air and they can either get eyes on or they can identify it because their sensor may have a different capability that mine can't, they can go ahead and say, yep, that's a MiG-29 or that's a MiG-31 Kilo or something, and they can push that across the network so everyone knows this thing that's floating around in the sky is nobody's friend.
Yeah, so for those of you of my followers who've played DCS, maybe, I know I do, a data link system from an AWACS, so Airborne Command and Control, can designate a target and declare, so they can declare a target and mark it on their system to say, hey, this is friendly or this is enemy. And because everybody's interlinked, Habitual Line Crosser in his Patriot system now knows whether that's a friendly or not.
Exactly.
Yeah, so integrated air defense, we've covered that. So next part, what are the major threats to an air defense network, and how does each part of an integrated air defense system handle it?
Okay, so when you're integrated into a network, obviously, like we talked about before, certain things have a higher probability of kill versus other things. Now, Patriot itself is designed to shoot down rotary wing, fixed wing, cruise missile, tactical ballistic missile, or theater ballistic missile, or threat ballistic missile, depending on where you read it. Just like UAV is also RPA, or UAV is unmanned aerial vehicle, RPA is remote piloted aircraft, and then UAS is unmanned aerial surveillance. There are three acronyms for the exact same thing. So Patriot is rated for all that. However, THAAD is not necessarily rated for UAVs and cruise missiles, because THAAD is watching way out there. Aegis is rated for damn near everything because of the variations of its payload. It can carry everything from Hellfires to Tomahawk cruise missiles. It's like a build your own single point of air defense. I love the Aegis.
I mean, the Navy doesn't have the luxury of having a different launcher and a different system. They have to carry everything on the ship, so Aegis can do everything just about.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, Patriot is not capable, and theoretically it could be capable, but it's never been done, shooting down artillery shells. Now it can probably detect them, but that's more of an LPWS, or the land-based phalanx weapon system. Some people refer to it as CRAM, which is counter rocket artillery and mortars. It is a pissed off R2D2 that fires 20 millimeter high explosive shells at 75 rounds a second, and it is a cool little machine.
It's a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing. Yeah. It shoots down mortars. Basically, during the war in Afghanistan, there was a lot of problems with indirect fire, and so I don't know if it was because it wasn't in place originally, but CWIS is what you use to shoot down incoming anti-ship missiles, which is the 20mm Vulcan on the side of aircraft carriers and destroyers, which shoots down anti-ship missiles. With the advent of the war in Afghanistan and counterinsurgency and Iraq, you had to intercept incoming rounds like mortars, artillery, and they developed that system and adapted it to land use, which is basically the same system. And it hooks into the Army's really, really cool and super secret squirrel artillery tracking radars, which picks them up. It calculates the ballistic arc of what's coming in at you, and then it tasks the gun system to intercept it. Right? So that's
absolutely.
So that's what deals with direct kinetic threats to the air defense network initially, and SHORAD. So then we move up next to that. So things that are shooting at you personally.
So things that I defend against, for me in Patriot, would be medium-range ballistic missiles, sometimes short-range ballistic missiles. Everyone thinks that every time someone rolls out a missile, it's an ICBM. An intercontinental ballistic missile is a very specific threat, and it has a very specific set of circumstances, and I actually touched on it in one of my YouTube videos. It has to hit 5,500 kilometers.
Yeah.
It has to be able to hit further than that. So it's like U.S., Russia, China, France, and the U.K. I think are the only countries that have operational. Oh, and North Korea, operational ICBMs.
With North Korea, we use operational very loosely, I think.
Yeah,
Very loosely.
So for us, we would identify something. If we're, how do I word this? Sorry, I got to dance around some things a little bit here in my head.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
As long as we're looking in the right areas, our air defense systems should be able to see these things as they're boosting in the boost phase. So there's the phases of flight of a ballistic missile are launch, boost, apogee, separation, terminal, right? So in the boost phase, it's still climbing, and it's climbing really fast. So we would be able to identify it, and then as soon as we determine throughout its flight path that it's going to hit us or what we're protecting, because you can't protect everything with one air defense system. It has a limited amount that it can protect, because if it's too far off, it takes too long for missiles to get there. The angles aren't right. There's a lot of different variables, and all of that is stuff that I cannot touch on.
Yeah.
So once it's determined that it's going to hit where you're at, you would then engage said threat. So ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, UAVs, air breathing threats or air breathing targets. We call them ABTs. Those that encompasses fixed wing and rotary wing. And I think that's it for Patriot capable threats. Well, things that we can engage. There's always more threats, but yeah.
Okay, and about things that are fired at you to destroy you. So.
Oh, you're talking about arms and ASMs.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, my bad. I completely brain dumped that. My bad. Arms.
No, all good. Wait, you're the guest. Go. Be
So
air
arms
defender.
So arms or anti-radiation missiles. Theoretically, now we've never succeeded in doing this, but we've only had one ever shot at us. An anti-radiation missile is a missile that locks onto a specific radar signature and hones in on that radar signature and comes screaming at you at Mach classified and tries to rip through your radar. Most of the time, these things are not ballistic in any means. They don't even have explosives. They want to destroy a radar, so they just rip right through the radar. No big fireball, none of that stuff, right? The only time we've ever had one hit a Patriot system was actually fired by a friendly F-16, right after the 2 fratricide incidents. So I'm not disagreeing with his choice. You know, there was 2 friendly pilots that lost their lives at the hands of Patriot, and he's like, not me, not today, and decided to smoke a Patriot unit. So with that, there are. Sorry, this is one of those, again, weird things. There are things that we can do passively before we have to shoot those anti-radiation missiles or air-to-surface missiles. You'll hear me use ASM or ARM interchangeably. But worst case, we would just shoot it down, because we do have the capability of hitting those things and hitting the plane that launched them too.
Okay, and for those of you who are wondering, passive countermeasure versus active countermeasure. An active countermeasure is something that you deploy to defeat the threat. Passive is systems that you engage that neutralizes the threat before it becomes an active. The reason you can't talk about it is because that is electronic warfare, intelligence warfare. That is stuff that screws usually with the electronics or the sensors on the missile that's tracking, and that is way above our pay grade, ladies and gentlemen. You can't tell us.
Yeah, that's a quick way for me to get a trip to jail.
Yeah. Point is, from what we can infer from our guest, Patriot has some super secret squirrel stuff that can affect the ability of a weapon system to prosecute on Patriot itself.
Yes.
There. Now, that being said, yes, the reason why they got hit by an anti-radiation missile is, yes, friendly fire incidents. And also because the AGM-88 HARM, as the MiG-29s in Ukraine have proven, is a deadly piece of machinery. Thing is fast. Thing is very fast.
Which one is that?
The AGM-88 HARM, or was it a Shrike that hit the Patriots?
I have no idea.
It might have been a Shrike. Well, that's me being jet nerd. Don't mind me.
Oh no, you're good. There's a lot of missiles I don't fully understand. I know what they look like kinematically, but I have no idea what their name is.
But yeah, usually for the destruction of a radar site, you want the warheads in those are either kinetic directly, as he said, or fragmentation. So they'll blast and try to bust holes in the radar to knock it out.
Yes.
So which is
Mhm.
what the harm does, because the primary target for that is the Big Bird radar or the flat face radar for the Soviet S-300 and S-400 systems, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Oh, absolutely.
But now we're up to the fun part, the one thing that we're all waiting on and we're all bated breath, because the war in Ukraine, because of the lethality of our friend and colleague here and his Department of Defense in both the Russian camp and the Ukrainian camp, air combat in Ukraine is basically neutralized to flying nap of the earth, which we'll go into in a minute, and firing standoffs, so cruise missiles, or you fly in at 0 feet, pop up, shoot ballistic, and then bug out, chaff flare all the way back before you can get fired on, or basically any fixed-wing aircraft that tries to fly over the forward edge of the battle area in Ukraine dies. Either
Yes.
the Russians or the Ukrainians kill it. Which means that air defense artillery is number one, or air defense artillery or air defense in general is the number one factor for the air war in Ukraine, which is why I have our guest on. So, without, again, getting yourself sent to prison, what is your current take on the air defense situation in Ukraine and their setup?
So the way they're set up right now, Manpad Stingers they are a low cost, high effective capability. I mean, you can carry them anywhere. You can jump out of planes with them. They are fast. They are accurate. They don't very often miss. And most of the time they're moving so quick and they're fired from such short range that pilot doesn't have an opportunity to react.
Yeah.
That being said, they have a limited, and I'm really personally impressed with the Ukrainians' ability to shoot down cruise missiles with it.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Because that cruise missile, I mean, it produces heat, so Stinger is a heat seeker. But they're actually going so slow that the Stinger can catch up, which I thought is really cool. However, ballistic missiles don't produce heat. So the fact that Ukraine right now doesn't have any way to defend against the ballistic missile threat leaves them open to getting hit. That's why Patriot became that probability, right? I've known this for a long time, and I say this to my students. The next war, especially for the United States, will be won or lost by a nation's ability to conduct air and missile defense.
Mm-hmm.
Every Tom, Dick, and Harry dictator out there has missiles stashed away. Every single one of them. If they got a couple million in the bank, they buy them from Iran, they buy them from Russia, they buy them from North Korea. So they got missiles. They're not great. Like, we have great missiles because ours are very expensive. But their missiles are, they're okay. But they just buy a bunch of them because if you send your Air Force, you risk your pilots. If you send your Army, you risk your soldiers. If you send your Navy, you risk your sailors. But if you send missiles, they're fire and forget. Hit, don't hit, doesn't matter. You're still out the money regardless. So it costs money and not lives. So everybody loves sending missiles nowadays. So as for Ukrainians, again, I don't have a dog in this fight, but I thought they were going to get bowled over because I looked at Russia very differently. I'll straight up be honest, I thought they were just going to get ran through. I was like, well, they had a good run. The fact that they're fighting like the third monkey on the ramp to Noah's Ark and it just started raining, I am impressed.
Yeah, we all are. It's, I mean, maybe we were selling them a bit short. No, actually, I don't think so. Ukraine's armed forces since 2014 in Euromaidan have been trained by the US Army and NATO, so I expected them to be really effective and razor sharp initially, but I was not expecting the amount of Western support that they got. There was a huge amount of backup from all of us. The other part, of course, is we assumed Russia was way more competent than they actually.
There's with that. So again, I say this as an individual, not as any member of the DoD, but I pay attention to history, and Vladimir Putin is an old KGB agent. The guy doesn't go to the bathroom unless it provides a tactical advantage. And we're not seeing Su-57s. We're not seeing T-104s. We're not seeing his best and brightest, and I don't know why. Either A, they were beating their chest a whole lot and blowing a whole lot of smoke, or I don't know.
Biggest indicator we have is with T-14 and the Su-57. The Su-57 is a non-factor simply because there's 6 of them.
That's fair.
And as you said, we've reclassified them. They're no longer a stealth aircraft. They're a low observable aircraft now.
Yep.
Because we have AWACS on the border of Ukraine, and Su-57s have started flying occasionally around the borders of Ukraine to have a look around, because it's a lot more survivable for them to have a look than it is for an Su-30. My guess is with that reclassification, our boys in AWACS on the Romanian-Ukrainian border got a look at one, and they saw it.
Yeah.
And look, if our AWACS can see an Su-57 from the Romanian border, it does not bode well. And there's other problems too. The project has been really delayed, especially because the Su-57 hasn't received the next level, the next Klimov engine set that they were supposed to have. They were supposed to have a new set of engines that were capable of supercruise, similar to the F-22s, with shrouding, covering all that. They haven't got them. They're still rocking the same engine as the Su-35. So
I had no idea. You definitely are a flight nerd, man. You're teaching me stuff right now. I'm here for it.
So it doesn't have. They also have a massive disadvantage in electronic warfare and flare capability as well. And also GLONASS. GLONASS is nowhere near as accurate as GPS. Nowhere near. So, in terms of, the limitations of the Russian air campaign, because Desert Storm, for those of you who haven't seen the Operations Room video, I highly recommend it. But Desert Storm, I have dreams about Desert Storm. When I'm playing a game or Command or War Game or something, and I want to design an air campaign, Desert Storm is the most beautiful thing. It is art.
I think it was the first time since actually probably since Vietnam that any nation anywhere in the world had received the unkempt force of the United States military. The coordination that just went into that, it was beautiful. It was freaking art.
Hyper war. It was hyper war, I think, was the doctrine term at the time during the late 80s. But what we expected from Russia in the initial phase of the invasion was to do that, because as an air defender, your job is to maintain the integrated air defense and to defeat the threat, right? And the primary counter to that, so the primary way for you to be taken out of the equation is they have to overwhelm you. They have to make it so you can't meet the threat.
Absolutely, yep.
We killed the Iraqis by doing that. Straight up. We hit them with literally the entire Air Force at once. They had to turn their radars on to kill us. The moment they did, the EF-111s jammed them, and then the F-16s just rained arms and strikes. F-4s... I missed the Phantom. F-4s and F-16s just rained anti-radiation missiles, knocked them out, and then the Strike Eagles just went in and just killed everything. And then
Go ahead.
Mwah. Just beautiful. But that's the thing right now. We didn't see that from the Russians. And so the
logistic inconsistencies, not being able to fuel, feed, arm, it's honestly, that part took me by surprise. You would think that any nation, especially a near peer threat, would place such a high priority on logistics. If I don't get fuel, my Patriot system is useless. If I don't get missiles, I can't shoot nothing. I know this. So to have just such logistic failures so early on in the war tells me either incompetence of command or just failure to plan.
I'd say both. From looking at it,
good.
The fact that they launched anyone who's read a history book, February is the end of winter leading into the mud season, and they launched an invasion in the mud season when that is precisely what stopped Hitler before. The fact that you won that same campaign 70 or 80 years ago.
Yeah.
And then you commit, and then the thing that stopped your enemy back then and caused all their major issues is exactly when you choose to invade. You try to invade a country which has no road network and no... Because Soviet urban planning, because of the size of the Soviet Union, you see it in the US too with the interstates, is that capital cities are like this massive hub with lots of roads, and then those roads are it until you get to the suburbs of the next city.
Yep.
And you're trying to launch an invasion with mechanized forces through a country that you can't go off-road, so you've only got one road that you can use. You've got one
Yeah.
sealed road.
Heavy breathing in A10 commences.
Good lord. Again, moving back to the air defense discussion, that was the biggest problem for the Russians initially, is they went in thinking, we are going to regime change. We are going to take down enemy. No one defeats Russian military. And they bomb down these highways and get outside of their integrated air defense system. And the moment that happened, Bayraktars just start pounding those columns. So, yeah, air defense is king. So, leading that back, we've kind of already covered it. So, Ukraine's air defense manpads have been way more effective than anyone gave them credit for.
Yeah, I'm very impressed personally.
What's your take on the layered defense in terms of Ukraine's rear areas, so versus the cruise missile threat from S-300 and...
From what I'm understanding, and I have a very limited knowledge of exactly what systems they have. I've been told they're getting some similar to Maneuver SHORAD that the U.S. has, our Striker style. They're getting something from France. I'm not familiar with that system. I was told that they are getting one U.S. Patriot system. Now that one system will not win the war, but if they protect it effectively, you have more or less an impenetrable bubble in one small location. So,
which
go ahead.
I would say, well, one of my things in my air war video, which I theorized, would be that the big issue keeping Ukraine from getting its air force and its main military system back up and running is the fact that the Russians can reach out and touch people with their cruise missiles and they can just keep hitting things. If they can secure a chunk of airspace which has an airfield, power station, and stuff in it, possibly near Kyiv, which would be where I'd put it, you can then put... NATO can start sending nicer toys, because now we're pretty sure they won't get blown up. Because their biggest thing is that they don't have a safe spot where they can keep really high value targets, because the Russians can hit everywhere at the moment. But if they have an area where they can defend, that'll change things.
Well, provided that they employ it correctly, right? So we've seen what happens when you employ air defense systems incorrectly, especially Patriot. So a lot of people in my comment section, the Russian fanboys, and I'm sure they're watching this, oh, it did so bad in Saudi Arabia. During that exact same time when those UAVs were getting through in Saudi Arabia, those UAVs were, the United Arab Emirates was using the exact same Patriot system and was shooting those drones down with that Patriot system.
Yep. So
you have the same system in two locations. One was succeeding, one was failing. And you need to know why. Well, operator error. Yeah. So what happens is the Patriot radar is a powerhouse, but it has an ability only to see so much, right? So it's pushing out millions of beams every second. And these beams, I mean, they're bouncing off of everything and you're getting returns. Now, as an air defender, you don't need to see every little thing that's out there, because you're getting returns off of clouds. You're getting returns off of birds. So you set parameters that I only need to see things that are doing this. I can't tell you what those parameters are, but you set certain parameters. Now, if your parameters are set incorrectly, there's things that can fly straight at you and you're never going to see them. They will never be displayed to the operator. The radar will see it, but it won't display it to you. Now, everyone's big solution is, well, just turn those off and see everything. Well, I don't want to be sitting there trying to interrogate, which is me using the identify friend or foe system inside the Patriot. I don't want to be interrogating a fucking cloud for 20 minutes trying to figure out what it is and maybe try and shoot at the damn thing. I don't want to be interrogating a flock of geese. That's a waste of my resources and a waste of my capability. Plus, there's going to be too much going on in that space, and things might also get through. So it's a weird balance, and it's hard to maintain that balance, which is why more air defense systems are better than having fewer when it comes to layered air defense.
Yeah, so that's one of the major reasons why early air intercept radars on fighters had a big issue with ground clutter. It's the same thing. You're firing a beam at something and you're going to get a return. And you need to have the computer systems and the algorithms in place to determine what is a target and what isn't. And if you haven't set those parameters correctly, one of the main methods in aerial combat, for those of you who are that way inclined, one of the major ways to defeat an air-to-air missile in terms of radar guidance is to notch a missile, which is kind of fly parallel to it this way. I assume it would work on a SAM system, but it's a bit harder to do, especially when they're interlinked, because you've got single target track, so you're like lasering. It's a bit more complicated than that.
So I thought I couldn't say this, but actually people corrected me in my comment section, so I can kind of explain how it works, because a lot of air defense systems work this way. This Patriot is not the only one. THAAD does a really cool thing on its own, but I don't think I can say that one. But Patriot, so in one of my videos, I did talk about how the missile is in flight long before that pilot is ever notified.
Yeah.
And the way that works is, again, a lot of air defense systems do that. Unlike a Stinger, when you hand off the engagement to a Stinger, the Stinger paints the target itself with a radar beam from the nose of that Stinger. It says, "This is my target." And that notifies the pilot, "Hey, there's a missile inbound." Well, Patriot is watching that target fly through the air, and it can fly all sorts of different... It can do flares. Patriot's not a heat seeker. It can do chaff. The radar's smart enough to see right through it. You may lose it for a split second, but not for long, right? It can do flippies and dippy-doos. Unless it crashes into the ground, I'm not going to lose it. So while that missile's in flight, screaming at, according to the internet, Wikipedia, Mach 4.1, I can't say how close that is or how accurate that is, but that's what the internet says. So this missile's screaming at it, and then right as it gets within a certain range, the Patriot goes, "Hey, this is your target," and it tells the missile, which it's been guiding the entire time, and hasn't painted that target. In that last little split second, it goes, "Hey, the engagement's yours," and the missile goes, "That's my target," and it paints it as it's flying in for the last, the split second, and that's it. So, which is why every single pilot who's ever been engaged by US Patriot has never survived.
Yeah, so it's very similar to it's very similar in theory to an AMRAAM fired from a jet. It's a bit different because the Patriot, I don't know, you probably can't tell me if it's not. The Patriot, I don't believe, has an onboard seeker system. At least not the ones I'm familiar with.
So I don't know I think I could... No. Tell you what, let me just do a quick Google search while I got you there. Continue.
Okay, so
because I want to verify.
So an AMRAAM is fired from a fighter jet, from an F-16, F-15, whatever, has a seeker head in the middle of it, in the front of the air, missile system, powered by a battery. Terminal guidance is provided by the missile itself, but that missile does not go active until it acquires the target on its own seeker and homes in, called going pitbull, right?
Okay.
Prior to that, the F-15 or the F-16 is using track while scan, which is radar illuminating the target, and uses a data link system from the fighter to the missile to guide the missile in. But because the radar is providing data link information to the missile rather than an actual single target track, where the fighter jet is scanning the enemy plane, but it's not locking it. It's scanning the plane, and it fires the missile in that general direction. And when the missile follows the data link track, so, yes, the fighter jet tells me that the target is over here, so I'm going to fly in that general direction, and I'll be able to get around. And when it gets within 10 nautical miles or so, the AMRAAM switches on and goes, aha, and shoots a beam out, finds the target, and then chases it and kills it. The pilot only gets a warning on his RWR system, radar warning receiver, when the AMRAAM itself turns on its radar and locks him. So, he doesn't know that the missile's been fired at him until the missile is almost about to hit him. So
I didn't know if I could use the term pitbull, but you used it, so yes, that's exactly what it is. I wasn't sure. I don't know what joint service brevity may be classified. So I can actually talk about this. I just found it here. So the Patriot Advanced Capability version 2 does not have this. PAC-2 is a type of interceptor. That one is proximity kill, which means as target's flying through the air, a missile comes from wherever it comes and it explodes as it hits the target. Now this is a higher probability of kill on ABTs or air breathing threats, but certain chemical threats, which have capsules inside of it, it may not do as much damage. Okay. Now the PAC-3, which I'm just finding out here, does have a semi-active KA band seeker. So once it gets close enough, it passes off that Ka band seeker. The seeker then paints the target and guides itself in for the rest of the flight.
Yep.
And that one is hit to kill. So it's
Kinetic.
tip to tip. We'll just go with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that one rips right through it, and that has a higher chance of rupturing those chemical pods in there.
And as we said, the speed of that missile is Mach 4.1 according to Wikipedia, but we'll go with that.
I'm gonna leave that one alone.
Aggressively wing to camera. Point is, well, because of that capability and it goes purple, the missile is moving so goddamn fast. There ain't nothing nobody can do. Like you'd have a better chance of pulling the Matrix than you would getting away from that thing. Like it's...
Yeah, you can eject, but you still are probably gonna get some. Like if it's a Pac 2 coming at you and it's proximity kill, you're probably still gonna die.
And look, let's be honest. If you're defending against an integrated air defense network and you're in range of Patriot, like realistically, you're going to be going Mark Jesus in this turn angle, sort of like trying to get away because you've realized your mistake. If you try to eject at that speed at that angle, I mean, good luck to you, buddy. I mean, I believe.
Yeah.
If you don't
They're going to be a bag of goo.
Yeah, if you don't like living is cool and all, but like going out and stuff, there have only been like 3 people I think who have survived the supersonic ejection. So good luck. Like I believe in you.
On the list of things I want to do, I'm not. That's not.
Yeah,
on there.
no, forget it. But we've all got a few inches to spare. Am I right, fellas? No, okay. All right. So we've sort of gone all over the place, but hey, that's okay. So. You're an air defender. You were tanks originally. You moved over to air defense. So let's go back a bit. Let's do a brief history of the Patriot.
So I tell you what, I'll do you one a little bit better, right? So air and missile defense got its start actually as coastal defense artillery in the early 1900s. Some people say it can be dated all the way back to like the American Civil War, where they shot down was it barrage balloons? But no one can confirm that. So in the early beginning of, was actually towards the tail end of World War One, the coastal defense artillery were actually considered some of the best shooters in the artillery world because they had to fire in 3 dimensions because boats go up and down and are close and further away. So firing in 3 dimensions, they were considered good shooters. Now in 1933, if I'm not mistaken, they actually changed over to anti-aircraft artillery. Now in December 8th, 1941, right after the attack on Pearl Harbor, there was a coastal defense artillery unit in the Bataan Peninsula. Now, if you're familiar with history, you know what happened at Bataan and how they fought tooth and nail for like 6 months. I mean, they fought like hard.
Yep.
Well, that's where air defense artillery gets our motto, first to fire, because after the Bataan Death March and those guys got back, it come to find out the air defenders, well, the coastal defense artillery guys, were the first ones to start shooting and the last ones to stop. They were forced to surrender because they were gonna fight to the very end. So that is where air defense artillery kind of got their start. And then you have various programs, which, I mean, there's so many air defense. You got Sprint missiles, you got Nike Ajax, you got Nike Hercules, which is my favorite air defense system. You got Hawk missile system. So as time progressed on, Raytheon Technologies has been like the premier radar tech in the world. They actually invented the microwave. Fun fact, it was a radar. Yeah, it was in the 1950s. Some woman was trying to work on a radar technology, and she accidentally microwaved a sandwich in her pocket, and that's where the microwave came from. I'm sorry, I'm a big history buff, but Patriot was actually started in the 1960s, and the first production model came out in the 1970s. But back then it was designed to shoot down aircraft. Well, because missiles were still kind of a new thing, and the whole idea of shooting a missile with a missile was kind of a silly idea, right? But things were starting to move so fast that the reason we don't use anti-aircraft guns anymore is because you'd have to shoot way behind you as the jet is coming at you to try and hit them with any bullets because they're moving so damn fast. So a change needed to be made. We decided to use missiles. That's what missiles were designed for. We were supposed to shoot down aircraft. Well, fast forward to 1991, Patriot was employed in Saudi Arabia, and Saddam Hussein did his thing, and he invaded Kuwait, and they fired missiles into Saudi Arabia. The first ever guided missile intercept that had ever taken place in history was U.S. Patriot and Saudi Arabia. They didn't have anything else. It was kind of a happy accident, and Patriot was so expensive they almost canceled the program. That right there told the government, like, oh, hold on, there's something here. I mean, they had like a 25% hit ratio. It was not good. So they went back to the drawing board and they're like, well, we can improve this. We can do that. And there's a lot of people who hear about these things and they're like, oh, Patriot still sucks. If you think we still have the same system from 40 years ago, I'm sorry, you should probably go seek professional help. So then fast forward to 2003, the common statement there is that Patriot shot down more friendlies than it did enemy missiles. That's a false statement. Patriot shot down 2 friendlies, a British Tornado and an F-18. And it's actually a really good thing, and I'll explain why. And they shot down over a dozen Scuds. Now, Scuds travel at, according to Wikipedia, around 1,700 meters a second, which is hypersonic. So for all you fanboys out there that hypersonics are new, no, Saddam was throwing those hypersonics in like 2003. So right there, we learned that it had a capability, and it was able to hit those things. Granted, it's constantly improving. The system is constantly improving. The radars we had back then and the missiles we had back then, we don't even have anymore. Like, we have so much newer stuff. And then we actually have new LTAMS is coming online, which is the lower tier air and missile defense sensor. It's the new Ghost Eye family of radars. Raytheon, if you're watching this, it's a dumb name for a family of radars. I'm just going to tell you. IBCS from Northrop Grumman is coming online, which is the Integrated Air Missile Defense Battle Command System. I worked on that program for 4 years. Sorry, I'm getting way off topic. Going back. So when those things happen, obviously bad things happen in warfare, and people get hung up on that, and they love throwing that at people's face. But it's a good thing these bad things happen because we learn to get better. So out of those fratricides, a couple of changes happen. One, we now train our operators completely different. Back then it was, hey, the system is smarter than you. When it recommends something, you need to listen to it. Now we understand that I could have a plane flying the exact profile of an enemy missile. The system is going to tell me it's a missile, and I need to know that it's a plane. So that's a complete change to our training. Back then, that's how it happened, is those guys flew like a missile. They didn't have their IFF transponder on. The system said they were a missile, so they shot them down. That's exactly what happened in 2003. So those processes changed. Furthermore, we introduced something called the ADAFCO position. ADAFCO stands for Air Defense Artillery Fire Control Officer. Now, the ADAFCO position is the liaison between the Air Force and the Army. You have two of them. You have an upper tier and a lower tier. And they translate Army to Air Force and Air Force to Army, and they help coordinate everything that goes on in the air. They're part of the joint kill chain. So we all speak the same language, and this also gives pilots a little bit of a warm and fuzzy when they're flying into Patriot airspace, because they all remember that we shot down pilots, but not a lot of them know exactly what happened. We also introduced the Patriot Master Gunner course for enlisted personnel and the Patriot Top Gun course for officers. So to teach our operators how to understand these systems better and to employ them effectively. So all those changes came about, and now we're at modern Patriot, which is, it's been around for a hot minute, but we got Recaro racing seats inside them bad boys now. We got LCD screens. We no longer have cathode ray tubes and stuff. Like, we got, no more switch indicators. It's all touch screen. Like, we have updated a lot. So, but that's kind of the history of air defense and Patriot up to where we're at now.
Right. And you've covered a lot of, the next question is busting myths about Patriot. Myths about Patriot. So, it can't hit anything. Well, you proved that one. Yeah. Yeah.
The other one that people love to say is there was a video in Saudi Arabia. You see a Patriot missile come out, it turns, and it comes right back at itself and hits the ground. I know exactly why it did that. I can't explain why. Well, okay, hold on. Okay, there is in our tabs. Tabs are pretty much how you configure the system, and you can see that there's one in there. I can't tell you which one it is or where it's at, but there is a number that needs to be put in there that tell your missiles at a certain elevation, stop chasing it into the ground. So what happens is, and this happened in 2003, missiles were coming in and Patriot would fire late, which again, we fixed that. That was part of the Patriot bug program, the Patriot clock bug, which was a big problem we had. And as those things are coming in, they would hit the ground and Patriot would chase them straight into the ground. And that causes a lot of collateral damage. But there's an entry in there that now says if you're going to miss, bail out and self-destruct, so we don't cause that additional collateral damage. That country that had that happen didn't have that turned on. So the big explosion you see is not actually from the Patriot missile. It's from what it was chasing. So
yeah,
that's why it came out, flipped around, and came right back at itself, which also is kind of a testament to how hard those missiles can turn.
Yep, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And that, of course, leads into what you see. I mean, not wanting to give our Rusky friends too much credit, but that does lend some explanation as to why every now and then from every single country around the world, you'll see a SAM system just go whoop, whoop, bang, because someone hasn't put the right codes in, the right numbers in, and someone's fucked up, and it's just gone like. The thing with military fuck ups is when you do it, you do it big, right? You do it big.
There's one that I saw recently, and it's from an air defense system, and I will admit I don't have an explanation for this one. I'm very curious myself. There's a Russian pantsir somewhere in Ukraine, and it's like, I'm an independent missile defense system. I don't need no man to tell me where to shoot, and it starts like spinning and shooting in random directions, like towards the cameraman and stuff. Like, I don't know what happened to this pantsir. I don't know what it's shooting at, but I've never seen that happen.
Еще! Я оглушила уже! Ебать!
Skynet is real.
I guess so.
Nah, Skynet is real. No, well, if you want to see what Skynet, check out my video and HLC's video on the B-21 radar, because that is some cool stuff.
I'm hoping we find out more about that thing in the near future. It's a really cool platform.
It really is, but like down here in Australia, Boeing Australia has been working on Project Loyal Wingman, which is basically drones that you can control from an F-35 and F-18, which makes me go that if we are doing that, and that's public knowledge, it makes me think that some of the MQ programs that the United States has running at the moment, it would not surprise me if B-21 has the capability to command a fleet of its own drones alongside it.
Well, I tell you what, if you want to interest, so I have there's about this many pages of a non-disclosure agreement that have my name on it, so I can't say a whole lot about the programs I was working on, but they did put something on YouTube, so I know I can talk about it. You can actually go, if you go on YouTube right now, if you're watching this, type in IBCS Flight Test 5. That is the shot that I made. I made 2 shots, 2 kills. Now, I shot at 2 MQM-178 drones that were flying a cruise missile profile. I fired at them with Patriot Advanced Capability version 2, or Pack 2 interceptors. 2 missiles flew out. They actually crisscrossed in the air. It's kind of cool. You see the smoke trail. And they hit both targets. But the crazy thing is, my Patriot radar couldn't see those targets. But 2 F-35s that were flying around out there could. So F-35s guided in Patriot missiles and smoked 2 cruise missiles. Now, that's not a capability they're getting, but we did it.
It's a beautiful, like, you know, it's a complex topic. We could, like, there's a lot of iffy things. Like, we can talk, you know, morality, ethics, politics for days, but when it comes down to it, those 800 billion Defense Department dimmer dollars are something. They are something.
Oh my God.
They are something. Like, it's like, I think NASA should get that money, but hey, if we're gonna have it, we might as well. It's truly
NASA
impressive.
had that defense budget. We have a moon base 50 years ago. I'm just saying,
dude, it'd be great though. But yeah, so that leads into the next question. We're into my fun part, guys, because we're into my every single one of these questions has within reason in brackets after it, because he can't tell us a lot about it. But so we've gone into air defense and we talked about Ukraine. So now it's the capability that Patriot can provide and some of its features, what you can tell us within reason.
It has an incredibly powerful radar. It is going to discriminate. So because of the band that it operates in, it can identify and discriminate tracks better than a lot of other radars out there. Like, for example, the S-400 has a very low fidelity, high range radar. Patriot has a very high fidelity, lower range. It's not a low range, but it's lower range radar. And by low range, I think the wiki says Oh, you know what? I'm not going to even say anything. I'm going to check the wiki. I want to see what it says because I know what it is in here. I know exactly what it is, but I'm not. I'm not going to jail.
So yeah, for those of you who don't know, the S300 and S400 system has a long-range, low-fidelity radar, which is then augmented by several arrays that are closer to the system. So you have flat face if you've got an older system, and you also have clamshell. Clamshell plugs into the Big Bird radar, which then helps it track low-altitude targets as well and closer targets in higher fidelity. Patriot doesn't need two radars. It has one big mamma jamma that does everything. Magnificent.
So according to the internet, it says it has a range between 20 and 100 miles, and we'll go with that. So keep in mind the horizon is about 20 miles away. So Patriot seeing up to 100, according to the internet. That chaps my ass. I'm sorry. Sorry.
We're not getting you thrown in prison. We're not getting you put in
I know.
Leavenworth does not need a new inmate.
No. So it is a very powerful radar. It's a very capable radar. I also, depending on how they choose to employ it, it's very robust when it comes to electronic countermeasures and electronic countermeasures. It has a whole lot of bells and whistles that it's capable of. It is, without reason, one of the most capable radar systems in the world, or else we wouldn't have been using it for 50 years. The interceptors, I will say, they're expensive and they're few and far between. Not few and far between. They're expensive. We have a lot of them, but they don't. So I think that it will provide, and what they're going to use it for is probably not for cruise missiles unless there's nothing else that can hit it. They will most likely use it for any of the ballistic missiles that he's throwing. And I, for one, am very curious. If Patriot shoots down a Kinzel, I'm going to rub my kibbles and bits all over my keyboard when I'm yelling at fucking Russian fanboys. I would love to see American Patriots shoot down a Kinzel. Oh, God.
That's the next question. That's the next question, because capability of Patriot. So we've already gone through what it does, how it does it. It can do all that. So the next one is, of course, again, the next within reason question. Anti-ballistic capabilities, which is what I think the Ukrainians are really worried about with Patriot. Specifically the Iskander-M theater ballistic missile, which is what they're aiming for. Like, because let's be real, we can't give them THAAD because that is like you don't like, you need to know exclamation mark.
Well, that's the same reason we ain't giving them like ATACMs, because that's even the U.S. agrees, like, that's straight up aggression, because you can target Moscow from pretty much the edge of Ukraine with an ATACM, and that's the unclass answer. When it comes to ballistic missile defense, so I don't know what the capability is of that missile. Do you happen to have at least an unclass maximum speed?
Give me a sec. I'll need to bring up the old charts here, because Iskander-M is a really interesting system, because the Iskander has a lot of counter interception capability. So it technically has the ability. So you know how a MIRV system has a several dummy warheads that go out in front of it to knock out anti-ballistic missile defense. I believe Iskander does have a similar system. Yep. So here we go.
Damn, I don't think. Let me see if I can say that, because.
But I do know. So maximum speed is Mach 5.9. But as we say, we talk about wiki numbers. I would like to point out that with not wanting to be too biased here, though this is not exactly a place for non-biased opinions. With the US, if you see a wiki speed or a wiki info, it is most likely more capable. In Russian weapon systems, I usually go the other way. So if the Russians say it can go Mach Jesus, I'm thinking maybe Mach Moses is more where we're at, right?
Yeah.
So 5.9 is, given it's a ballistic system, Mach 5.9 sounds about right. Like, similar to, like.
Can you give me a meters per second of that? I'm sorry, I just want to put it in perspective for people.
2,000 meters per second.
Okay. Not really too worried about it personally. Scuds travel at unclassified 1,700 meters a second, and Patriot successfully engaged those.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to Merv, so that's hard. That's yes, Patriot can deal with that. That's all I'm going to just say. That's all I can say. So that's similar to an early release submunition, which is a very known threat and has been around for a long time. Which is where like the Jericho missile from freaking
Yep.
Iron Man, it opens up and has all these
Yep.
explosives. It's really simple, but I can't find it anywhere on the internet. Like if I told you, be like, oh yeah, that's so simple. That's such an easy idea. Like it's so easy to deal with stuff like that. And the way they go about it, it's not some crazy technological, like, oh, our missile breaks into 9 pieces. It's not. It's the simplest thing. And if I told you, you'd probably laugh, but I can't find it on the internet. So yes, we can deal with that.
TLDR, can Patriot intercept Iskander? The answer seems to be yes. All right.
Yeah.
So, anti-ballistic capability, that's probably what Ukraine is going to be. They're going to park it near Kyiv, and that's what it's going to be for. And they're going to put all their high-value equipment in that Patriot bubble. Keep it safe. Which they can then use to expand their capability outwards as they go on. So, Patriot will be tied in. The other interesting part is because we aren't doing this at all, but that Patriot system would have data link integration with the AWACS flying around Romania. So if that AWACS were to perhaps see a Russian target before the ground radar does, and just so happens to let that system know, not that NATO would provide real-time tactical information to Ukraine ever, but obviously.
Well, so I'm a little curious. Do you know? So they're saying they're getting one Patriot system. Now, what does that entail? Because okay, so one
Patriot battery is
a Patriot battery. Okay, that's what they're getting.
I think I haven't seen. They say Patriot system, but I wouldn't imagine that they would send out just one launcher and one ICBS. Like they wouldn't just send out one system, and I would assume that if they're sending one Patriot, it would be a battery of the command system, and then how many launches? I don't know if you can. No, I think it's like an old school Patriot battery is like 4 launches per thing with a.
The unclassed answer is 8 launchers.
Yeah, right. So my guess would be they would have one battery, which would be the radar and the launchers and the command and the fire control system. Your box.
So yeah, I'm kind of curious just because so Patriot, the way it works, and this is all in class, right? So you got your launchers, you got your radar, you got your ECS, which is your engagement control station, which is the fire control area. You have an EPP, which is an electric power plant. It has 2 150 kilowatt generators on it that each pump out Patriot prime power, which is 208 volts, 3-phase, 400 hertz, which is a lot of juice.
That's a lot of power.
And they can parallel. So meaning you leave one running, you fire up the other one, you swap power over to this one, then shut this one down, so you never lose power throughout the entire thing. It's a capability of that. And then it also has an AMG, or an antenna mast group, which is just a big commo transformed taco truck. Like it pulls up, brush guards fold out, 2 antennas come up, and then you can reach out a pretty damn good ways. But here's the thing: Patriot has its own language, so if that AMG isn't talking to anybody, it's kind of pointless to give it to them. Now, if they give them a higher echelon unit like a ICC, or Information Coordination Central, which looks just like an ECS, except the guts are different and it doesn't have a radar with it. That's the higher echelon unit. So I was wondering if they were getting one of those, because that changes the capabilities of the system a little bit. So
yeah, well, again, we haven't got any firm information from the White House as to what exactly the Patriot deal entails. They're being a bit cagey about it, for security reasons, I would assume. I'd need to do a little bit more digging. If I do find anything while digging, I will put it in post here. But the assumption I would have is that NATO, which definitely doesn't officially, NATO is providing real-time ISR to Ukrainians. Definitely are. We don't admit it.
Well, I mean, it's not illegal. Everybody everywhere can spy on each other. There was a treaty signed. I can't remember which one. Is like in the 80s when the Soviet Union, right before they fell, where like, because I think I don't know if you saw that. I posted a video about it explaining it. Like, well, they didn't want us looking behind the Iron Curtain, so we came up with the U-2. They shot down the U-2, so we threw an SR-71 and said, "Fucking shoot it down now," and they couldn't. So then they all came to the table and like, all right, how about we just let each other spy on each other? So it's perfectly legal right now for any country to fly over another country as long as they identify themselves and they stay above a certain altitude.
Yep. So with that Patriot capability, we can, with the AWACS that are flying over Poland, and we have another one over Romania. We also have NATO forward expeditionary forces there. So we've got the Royal Netherlands Air Force, the Royal Air Force, the Brits. We also have, God knows, the F-15s out of Lakenheath are around, as are the F-16s of pretty much everybody. So there is a huge air presence providing a massive intelligence picture for the Ukrainians should they need it, which can talk to that Patriot system, which is probably what's going to make that thing so damn scary. The Russians won't go anywhere near the thing if they know what's good for them. They can't.
Well,
really
I thought it was very funny that they're like, if you give them Patriot, it's a target. We're like, that's the point.
Shoot at us, please.
Go ahead. Like, all right.
It's one of those things where, like, this is a tiny bit off topic. I always find it funny when everyone's like, you get those Russian channels which are like, oh yeah, NATO have special forces in Ukraine. Yeah, of course we do. The Soviets were sending advisors to Malaya in the 50s. Like, yeah, are there any uniformed NATO personnel fighting on the front line? No, because that would trigger Article 5. That'd be terrible. Are there suspiciously English-speaking people in Ukrainian uniforms which may have a green beret sticking out their back pocket in Kyiv right now? Almost certainly, yes.
Oh, yeah, they're advisors.
They're advisors. They're there for a reason. Now, like, with that in mind, that then leads us back to another question here, which is a comparison of Patriot to other systems currently in use around the world that you know of and talk about. So, of course, S-400 is the big one, but...
Yeah, S-400 is more designed for, I would compare it to that. And I didn't know a whole lot about the S-400 until the fanboys showed up in my comment section. And then I found out, like, well, okay, Turkey, they bought the S-400 because we wouldn't sell them THAAD, and that makes sense. Okay, so you would want an interim authority. So it's really hard to compare those systems because of each of them has a gap of highest efficiency, or highest capability, right? Now, Israel's a perfect example of a great layered air defense system because you got like Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, like they have all these different layers and they all overlap just a little bit so they can cover each other's gaps. That's the hard thing about Patriot because it has such a very specific gap in my brain. It's hard to compare it to things. I guess I could compare it to the Iron Dome, but Iron Dome shoots lower than Patriot does. But Iron Dome is just one of those things that I know the most about. I've heard a lot of people talk about NASAMS, and I don't know anything about NASAMS. I guess that's the Norwegian one that just recently got developed. I'm not.
It's a U.S. one. It's U.S. Norwegian partnership, and it is basically you know how the Avenger is a FIM-92 Stinger in a box on the side of a Humvee. Basically that it's a battery. It's I think it's an 8 missile battery of AMRAAMs, ground launched AMRAAMs. So it's basically the AMRAAM missile off an F-16 that's been tweaked a bit and then fired from a ground launcher.
So it's just so hard to compare Patriot because no other system in the world is so widely used. Germany, the United Kingdom, I think Australia has one too. I'm not sure. There's like 15 different countries: UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain. I think I already said Germany. They all have Patriot systems. They all love Patriot because it has a very specific role, and it's more of a fire and forget. You can push it out there, and it can operate entirely on its own, or you can mesh it in with a network. A lot of people love it. So it's very hard because no other systems like that. You don't have people lining up to buy S-300s, S-400s. You just don't. The amount of countries that have it, it's not comparable. For the money and for the capability, you will not find a better system in the world. That's what I guess that's the way I would put it.
We would like to put up a disclaimer that there is a bit of personal pride here, so maybe a little bit. In answer to your question, no, we do not have Patriot down here in Australia. The simple reason, as always in the Anzac community, our Kiwi brothers as well, we are too poor. We borrow yours. Protect us, Dad. Protect us, please. Save us.
I did run into some Aussies when I was in UAE. There was one guy. I was telling my wife this story. I was at the smoke pit and he came walking by and his mustache was like out to here. It was fucking beautiful. Like it was all curled and shit. And he walked by and forgive my terrible Australian accent, but this is the best I can possibly do. He walked by and I was like, man, yeah, that guy's mustache has 15 confirmed kills. And he's like, oi, I like it. And he just walked away. I was like, yes, fuck yeah.
Absolutely magnificent. But yeah, we're all broke. So his mustache does have 15 confirmed kills purely because it's the only weapon system we have available. Like we license build everything from the Austrians half the time, and the other half with. Man, you should have seen the Australian Army in like the 70s. That was a wild time. We had American helicopters, German tanks, French fighter jets. It was incredible. It was an yeah, and we had old British tanks. We had M113s because everybody has M113s. Although we couldn't afford an infantry fighting vehicle. So our guys, we kind of strapped a minigun to M113.
If it looks silly but it works, it's not silly.
Yeah, accuracy by volume is a perfectly legitimate strategy. In my opinion. But that's another thing. That's a big part of the Russian air campaign, which we've talked about on my channel a bit. But counter air defense for you guys is it must be a bit weird. I mean, for the US, it's not such an issue because our defense budget go burr. But with the lack of air interdiction, so during the Allied strategic bombing campaign of World War II, counter air missions were the destruction of enemy aircraft and enemy personnel who operate those aircraft. Right. With an air defense system that uses primarily missiles, you can't exactly do that anymore. So one theory we have with the drone swarms from the Iranian drone, the Shahed 136, and the the Russians are wheeling out KH-12 kitchen missiles. My dad was 5 when those were built. For those of you who want to know. And he was born in 1957, so work that out, right? So is that seems to be the strategy, that to exhaust the Ukrainian air defense through volume of fire? Is that a legitimate tactic, do you think, like realistically speaking, in terms of sustainment?
Against a country like that, yeah, that is a very with enough air capability, you can overwhelm any country's air defense capabilities. Like you can, even the United States, you can overwhelm us, but you would need, like the Air Force of every country out there combined. Like you'd need a lot. But it is doable. That being said, threats are constantly changing. Like unmanned aerial vehicles, they're getting smaller, they're getting cheaper. I mean, the Ukrainians are using them. They're strapping grenades to them and dropping them on people. Like it's getting easier to put a drone in the air and use those for suicide bombings or whatever, right? So the U.S. years ago, we decided that this was a big enough threat that we need to address this. That's how you get things like the directed energy MSHORAD, because it costs the cost of fuel for that thing to fire a directed energy bolt, and all you got to do, I mean, it doesn't take much to take these things down. These aren't heavily armored drones. They're Walmarts. They're plastics. You can just melt one of the rotors and they'll drop like a rock. Israel actually, it was like 2 months ago, I was watching or reading a story about it. They came up with they have their own directed energy weapon because Iron Dome is getting so expensive because the the Palestinians are starting to use drones, so it's getting expensive to use Iron Dome. So they came up with a directed energy, and for cost, it cost them $3.47 per shot to fire that directed energy laser. So,
absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, that's so.
We started to see them, those guys that you see following heads of state around. You've got like the Secret Service detail, and you got homie out the back who's like got this assault rifle the size of his car with a shovel sticking out the end of it. That's like,
yep.
like energy weapons, like people like it's really getting to a stage like hyper war is real. Like we're getting to the point now where the stuff we used to see back in the 90s, because you and I are both, well, I was a bit young, but we're both old enough to remember it. We're both old enough to remember Terminator 2 Judgment Day and all that sort of jazz.
Hell yeah.
All that sort of thing is no longer science fiction. That is now very, very real. Energy weapons are here today, ladies and gentlemen. The Air Force, I was talking about that with mate before, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. But the Air Force was experimenting with this very thing to shoot down ICBMs with a jumbo jet with a laser sticking out the top of it.
747. I don't know if did that program get shut down?
I don't know if it still exists. I need to look it up right quick, but I remember the laser jumbo was expensive. It was
I mean, as things get better, I mean, again, non-disclosure agreement, can't say a lot of things, but there's, these cheap drones. Everyone's like, oh, cheap drone to overwhelm a Patriot, cheap drone. Yeah, they're not as easy to come by as you think, but they can. Now, can Patriots shoot a cheap drone? Yes. In 2020, the United Arab Emirates shot down a $200 Walmart drone with a $2.5 million Patriot missile. It's doable. And when you have bottomless oil money, I mean, hey, fucking let it run it.
Go nuts. Smoke that thing. Just kill it.
So is it capable of doing it? Yes. But is it a bit of a waste? Also yes.
Yeah, that's a lot of money to be spending on it. I mean,
oh yeah.
That's why the Ukrainians have just started using manpads pretty much as their frontline air defense system, because the S-300 shoots down anything they can't get. But the guys at the front with the SA-8 Gecko and the manpad and the book system as well, realistically speaking, they can handle anything long before. Because cruise missile flight paths generally sort of hover at around, like, you see the calibers in Ukraine especially, like, they're hovering like a couple thousand feet, 3,000 or 4,000 feet. Like, they're coming in on low attack. Like, it depends. They can go high flight profile.
Yeah, it's entirely dependent, but I can tell you right now, moving that slow, unless they employ that Patriot system incorrectly, that cruise missile. I mean, yeah, it's going to pop up. It is by definition, it is a pop up track, because it's gonna get closer to you than a plane would before you see it. But it's not moving fast enough to change the outcome. It's okay, cool. I'm just gonna kill it now.
And of course, the density and the biggest problem they've had is, of course, like, because the air defense artillery setup in both sides is so intense, it's basically the front line is a no-fly zone. The forward edge of the battle area is a no-fly zone for either side. They can't get in, which means that anything coming from enemy direction over there towards you is instant kill anyway. Which means if they're flying in low, so the manpads are going to have a crack at it. If the manpads miss, the SA-8 Gecko and the book are going to have a crack at it. If they miss, the S-300 is going to have a crack at it. And if by some miracle it gets all the way to Kyiv, the Patriot system's going to kill it. But 9 times out of 10, I'm guessing, unless it's an Iskander ballistic threat, 9 times out of 10, that Patriot's going to be sitting there looking nice and pretty.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if Russia, as soon as they get there, if they can confirm that Patriot system is in Kyiv, they're going to test it. They're going to throw stuff at it, because it would be such a morale boost for the Russians to take out a U.S. Patriot system.
They won't.
Now, I wish them the best in their future endeavors. If they do succeed in it, I know exactly what's going to happen. They're just going to get a new one. Like, okay, here. Like, don't do that next time. And they're going to tell them what went wrong and how to fix it. Like, here, just, if it's operator error. But it would be such a morale boost for the Russians to actually succeed in doing something like that. So I know as soon as it's there and it's wheels on ground and it's set up, they're going to test it. They're absolutely going to test it.
What do you think they're going to throw at it? That's actually one of the questions I had.
TBMs, ballistic missiles, guaranteed. So especially, I don't know if they'll fire Iskanders at it. They'll probably fire older munitions, because if we shoot down their claim to fame hypersonic badass missile, that's gonna that's a morale killer for them. I would like to see if they could do it personally, but they'll probably fire old Scuds or No-Dongs. I mean, I think they bought some No-Dongs from freaking North Korea. They'll probably just throw some of those and see what happens. And if it hits way outside of what that Patriot unit is protecting, Russia's going to be like, we hit at them. The Patriot is useless, blah, blah, blah. And all the fanboys are going to come back out. But we don't waste our missiles on things that aren't going to hit us. They don't understand that.
100% no. Why would you? Why would you waste something that's not a threat to you, right? Like,
Exactly.
it's no point. So there we go. Like, we've covered just about everything. I mean, the only other thing was the hypersonic threat, but we've already covered that. It's just a meme at this point.
Yeah.
It's a meme. Like, there's no point. So, really, so, in summary, then, Ukraine's air defense situation is, well, I mean, it's status quo ante. Like, nothing much. The Patriot's going to add a huge anti-ballistic capability, but everything else is pretty much already covered. It's just going to add that extra layer. The big advantage, the big takeaway is the sensor capabilities that Patriot will provide.
Absolutely.
That radar is.
You're going to be able to provide an early warning for people. Because this thing, it'll still detect things that aren't going to hit you. So as those things are still, boosting, you can notify nearby towns, hey, this is coming. Get down and save lives. So on top of being able to engage things, you're going to be able to see a lot more and let them know that something's coming.
So with the AWACS providing coverage in the western half of the country from Romania and Poland, and you have maybe the Patriot around Kyiv, or maybe even a bit further forward near the Dnieper River to cover more bases, you're going to have the big advantage would be sensor integration. So the air defense of Ukraine will be able to see what's going on a lot better than they currently can.
Yes.
Because they've got their old clapped out S-300 Big Bird radars from the 1980s. I mean,
I would like to see when they put it in there. How far is the Russian border from Kyiv? Is it 100 miles? Because again, we're going from the wiki answer. But
I mean, technically that's from the Belarusian border, but they might as well be the same thing at this point. About that, it's a bit wonky because you have to go through the Chernobyl exclusion zone if you go through as the crow flies, which is always a bit fun.
Yeah, I would not want to go down in there.
No. The Russians seem very content to shoot at nuclear power plants, so I mean, take your pick. But
yeah,
in also, like, realistically speaking, like, in terms of distance, can Patriot see from Kyiv over the Russian border into Russian airspace? Yep, it would be able to. It will be able to see into Belarus. AWACS coverage has it already. I would say that probably it would be able to see into probably as far as Kursk. So Kursk is kind of, if you look at the map, you've got Kyiv here, Kharkiv's about here, and Kursk is here-ish. Moscow's up here somewhere, right?
Okay.
So Patriot cover just about here, like about.
Well, keep in mind it's only directional.
Yeah.
So it's not an oscillating. It's only one direction. So it's the. Go ahead.
They would have it probably. Search arc would be sort of northeast-ish over Belarus and northeast Russia. Yeah.
And I mean, you can adjust things for weather conditions and when you need to see further, and if you're wasting resources. There is so many adjustments in that damn system. Ooh.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, so we've basically covered just about everything. So the overall thing we've sort of got is that Patriot, is it the game-changing super weapon? Yes and no. It'll handle the ballistic threats better than their current set of systems, but it's the sensory integration with providing a better picture of what's going on, and of course integration with NATO's assets that make it scary. Whatever.
Yes.
And when it does need to shoot something, it will definitely kill it.
Well, yeah, Patriot. It. I don't think I can say that. Yeah, we'll just go with yeah. It'll hit it. If it shoots, it'll hit it.
Yeah. Amen. So that's just about covers everything. That covers everything. Like, really, unless we want to go into minutiae and you want to grab your equivalent of a NATOPS out that you can bring it up. Like, this is how this system works. Like, I can't even remember. Like, I besides the direct systems I play with in DCS, like, I've given up trying to memorize all the acronyms and designations for radars and stuff, and like ANPQRS 78.
Oh yeah, no, I'm trying to convince Raytheon and Northrop Grumman to come up with cooler names for their shit. I don't know if you saw that video. Like, just give me a cooler name, man. Like, come on.
The Ghost Eye. if you have something that's radiating, it's not exactly being stealthy, is it? It's...
My problem with Ghost Eye is we grew up in a generation. Have you ever seen that movie with Paul Rudd and frickin' what's his name? Sean William Scott. I think it's Role Models.
Rings a bell, actually. Yeah.
Where he's like whispering eye.
Yeah.
And then the guy says it on the phone. He's like, "It means vagina." Like that's all I think of when I hear Ghost Eye. Like that's it. That's all pops into my head. And I'm like, that's a stupid name.
If you want to talk about a thing that Pet hates about things named Ghost, the official name for the Loyal Wingman project that was come up is the MQ-28 Ghost Bat, I think it is, because a Ghost Bat is a species of bat that sort of hunts, like a pack or uses like a remote communication echolocation thing. That basically there was something that this bat did that mirrored a certain way the system functions, and so they called it the Ghost Bat. And I'm like you go from Reaper and Predator to Ghost Bat.
Yeah, there's so much better names out there.
Like my patriotism is high, but like even I've got my limits. Maybe not American level patriotism. Maybe British boomer level patriotism. Maybe they're somewhere living the life of a true Brexit geezer. But that's about it. So yeah, we have Habitual Line Crosser, Mr. Patriot himself. Subscribe to him, please do. If you like Defense Matters, it's always good. Subscribe to this channel too while you're at it. If you should have already if you're here, but hopefully we've helped.
Don't forget to turn on notifications for this guy right here, so that way we
click the bell.
Yeah, there we go. I'll help. Your shameless plug now.
Yeah, shameless plug. My shameless plug. No, in all seriousness, like, thank you for coming on. Like, it's always good to have like a professional. See, this is the main reason. Like, I've gone through a lot of what Habitual Line Crosser has said in my videos. But the thing is, as I said, I'm a military historian who plays DCS and researches these things. I have brought a Patriot instructor. Here he is. Like, if you want more clarification for my, he is here. Yeah, he also makes great t-shirts. I'm too big for those t-shirts, but
I will talk to my guy. We'll see if we can get some new size.
You need fluffy size. You need Hawaiian shirt size. What you need.
Got it.
The Hawaiian Habitual Line Crosser Hawaiian shirts would be absolutely.
Ooh, that's not half bad. I wonder if I can make that. I'm gonna get a hold of him.
A Hawaiian shirt. Like,
Hawaiian shirts.
Hawaiian shirts, just like gratuitous amounts of. I believe you Americans have gratuitous amounts of hua. I think just full on like bullets, skulls, like massive, like the full boog. If you will remember the memes from the mid 2010s.
Oh man, the boog boys. That was all everything.
The big igloo. Gotta love the big igloo. What a time to be alive. Events since then have kind of sullied that one a bit, but we won't go there. All right, thanks for tuning in, fellas. Links in bio. Subscribe. All good. Check out Habitual Line Crosser. He's cool. He's cool. He's cooler than me, but he is smart. He actually shaves his head. I was supposed to, but I forgot to, and so now I'm like I'm like a fat, bearded Mr. Burns. Just 10 times. Like I think my organ functions maybe a bit better than him. Anyway, we're rambling. That's us. That's us. Bye, guys.